Every video you will ever watch about this castle reaches for the same word: untouched. Never conquered, never destroyed, the one medieval castle in Germany that 8 centuries somehow forgot to touch. And it is not exactly wrong. But it is not the whole story either. Because in the summer of 1331, one of the most powerful princes in the Holy Roman Empire decided this castle needed to submit to him. When it refused, he did not simply attack. He built a second castle on the very next ridge, aimed some of the earliest cannon fire ever used north of the Alps at the walls, and kept the siege running for 5 years. The castle held, and then it surrendered. This is Eltz Castle, and untouched is the word that leaves all of that out. The first written trace of this family is a single name in a single document. A deed of donation issued by the Emperor Frederick Barbarossa in 1157, witnessed by one Rudolf von Eltz. The rock itself is almost certainly older than the paper. It is a natural platform 70 meters above the floor of the Elzbach valley, wrapped on 3 sides by the river below. The kind of site nobody has to be told is defensible. Masonry in the lowest stories of the original keep dates to the first half of the 12th century. Someone was building here before Barbarossa's clerk ever picked up a pen. What the family actually were is not quite what Castle suggests. They were ministeriales, unfree knights bound in service directly to the emperor, the kind of men a king used precisely because they answered to him and to no local prince. The historian Alexander Thon describes Eltz as remaining in direct disposition of the king through the 13th century, at a time when most of its neighbors had already been swallowed into the lordship of one Rhineland prince or another. It was not a rich position, it was a useful one. The rock sat on a minor road linking the Moselle Valley to the Mayfeld Plateau, and tolls on that road were the family's living. A small income, a defensible rock, and a direct line to the emperor. Everything that followed was built, quite literally, only on top of that. In 1268, an inheritance turned a single fortified house into something almost nobody else in Germany has. 3 brothers stood to inherit. Elias, called with the Golden Lion. Wilhelm, with the Silver Lion. Theodoric, with the Buffalo Horns. The obvious thing to do, the thing every other noble family in the empire did, was divide the land and let each brother build his own castle on his own share. They didn't. They kept the rock as one shared enclosure and agreed in writing that each branch would raise its own residential tower inside the same curtain wall. 3 households, 3 heraldic identities, 1 roofline. The agreement was set down as a Burg Friedensbrief, a castle peace deed first recorded in 1323 and renewed 3 more times over the next 2 centuries, a legal document doing the job an army usually does, keeping 3 families from tearing the place apart while they lived on top of one another. It worked. The arrangement governed the castle for more than 5 centuries. The Buffalo Horns line died out in 1786, and the shared ownership finally ended in 1815. Historians have a term for this arrangement, a Ganner ben Burg, a joint heirs castle. It was a recognized legal form, tried at other sites across Germany. Eltz is the textbook example only because it is one of very few where the agreement survives in both paper and stone at once. Think about what that means architecturally. Every tower you see rose not from one architect's master plan, but from 3 families who had to keep living together without killing each other. The building's entire shape is the physical record of a peace treaty. Because the rock allowed no room to spread outward, every generation of every branch built upward instead. Walk the small inner courtyard today, and a single clockwise turn carries you through 5 centuries of architecture in about 30 paces. Start with the room that explains all of it. The Knight's Hall, finished around 1520, is where all 3 branches sat down together to negotiate the terms they lived under. Carved into its ceiling is a small rose, the Schweiger Rose, the rose of silence. Whatever was said in that room, under that rose, was never to be repeated outside it. At the center of the courtyard stands the oldest fabric, the original keep, its lower 5 stories still the Romanesque masonry of the 1100s. left as built because after the split of 1268, it belonged to all three branches equally. Nobody could alter it without the other two agreeing. Across the yard, the House of the Silver Lion line holds one of the rarest survivals in the Rhineland. Wall paintings from around 1450, done in the manner of Burgundian court painters, and in the lower hall, a Madonna and Child attributed to Lucas Cranach the Elder. The youngest wing, timber-framed and finished in 1661, still belongs to the family today. It is not on the public tour. Someone is, right now, living there. Now the part the guidebooks skip past. Balduin of Luxembourg, Archbishop-Elector of Trier, and one of the most formidable territorial princes anywhere in the empire, was working to bring the independent imperial knights of his region under his own direct control. The lords of Eltz, allied with three neighboring families, refused to submit. Fighting opened on the 15th of June, 1331. A direct assault on the rock failed. The site was simply too strong. So Balduin changed the entire shape of the war. He built his own castle, Eltz, on a rocky spur 230 meters away and 40 meters higher, purely to bombard Eltz from above it. From there, his forces threw stone shot from trebuchets and fired pots de fer, crude early iron pot cannon, at the walls below. It is one of the earliest documented uses of gunpowder artillery anywhere north of the Alps. The siege ran for 5 years. Eltz's allies conceded in 1333, but the family held the residential core of the castle itself all the way to a negotiated peace on the 9th of January 1336. The terms were not generous. Eltz had to tear down its own outer fortifications and formally acknowledge Trier's overlordship. The keep, the halls, the shared chapel, those survived. The independence that started the war did not. So here is the accurate version, the one the tour buses tend to shorten. Eltz was never destroyed in war, never razed, never sacked after the Middle Ages, and never taken by storm in any century. But it was besieged for 5 years with some of the first cannon in Northern Europe, and it lost, on paper, if not on the ground. Never destroyed is true, and it is remarkable. Untouched is the lazy version. The ruin of Eltz is still there today, on the ridge above the castle, in clear sight of anyone who looks up. Losing a war to an archbishop, it turns out, is not the worst thing that can happen to a family in this part of Germany. It can also be the way back in. 2 centuries after the siege, Jakob III von Eltz became Archbishop-Elector of Trier himself, the very office that had once besieged his own family's castle, serving from 1567 to 1581, and a significant figure of the Counter-Reformation in the Rhineland. A century and a half after that, Philipp Karl von Eltz-Kempenich rose further still, Archbishop of Mainz, and by virtue of that office, Imperial Arch-Chancellor, in strict protocol terms, the highest-ranking Catholic prince in the entire Holy Roman Empire. And then, in the 1680s, the family's luck produced its strangest turn yet. During the Palatinate War of Succession, French armies under Louis XIV systematically leveled the great fortresses of the Rhineland, Heidelberg among them, reduced to the ruin tourists visit today. Eltz was on that demolition list. It came off it because Hans Anton zu Eltz-Uttingen, a member of the very family that owned the castle, happened to be a senior officer in the French king's own army and had his family's home struck from the list himself. 3.5 centuries after an archbishop's cannon failed to take it by force, Eltz survived a second war of destruction because one of its own sons was serving, of all places, inside the army that was doing the destroying. By the early 1800s, this stretch of the Moselle was almost impossible to reach. There was no railway here until the 1870s. And that isolation is exactly what made it irresistible to the romantic imagination. Painters came for the light and the ruin-haunted valley. Domenico Quaglio in 1812, Anton Diesler in 1838. J.M.W. Turner traveled the Moselle in 1840 and filled a sketchbook with studies of Eltz and the Eltz ruin above it. Victor Hugo made his own pilgrimage here more than 2 decades later, in the summer of 1863, and arrived to find the gate shut.
Our guide knocks. The only answer is furious barking. The whole castle might as well be one enormous mastiff snarling at us. No one comes. We knock again. Still no one. My companions go off to explore. I stay behind, alone, and draw a tower.
Even Victor Hugo couldn't talk his way past the front door on the first try. Which is, in its own small way, exactly the point. This was never a castle built to perform for visitors. But here is the turn in the story. Every one of Eltz's neighbors took that romantic hunger and built on it. Friedrich Wilhelm IV rebuilt Stolzenfels as a neo-Gothic fantasy. A German architect reimagined the Hochkönigsburg in Alsace for Kaiser Wilhelm II. In Bavaria, an entirely new castle was invented from nothing and called Neuschwanstein, the subject of our very first episode. Eltz took the opposite path. By the 1840s, the building was genuinely failing, roofs leaking, timber framing rotten. The lower Bailey buildings partly collapsed. Count Karl zu Eltz began a rescue in 1845 that ran until 1888 and cost the equivalent of roughly 15 million euros today. And through all of it, he corresponded with a museum in Nuremberg about a single question: how to leave the building's substance alone. Of every Romantic-era castle restoration in Germany, his produced the least romantic result, because he refused to invent what had not actually stood there before. What you see today at Eltz is not preservation by accident. It is restraint chosen twice by two different generations, nearly 600 years apart. The building's luck did run out once, briefly, in the 20th century. In September 1920, a chimney fire tore through 3 of the timber roofs and destroyed them completely. The family rebuilt in stages, finishing by 1930, following Karl's same rule: repair, don't reinvent. By then, Eltz had already become something close to a national emblem. In 1965, its silhouette went onto the back of the 500 Deutschmark note, a note that passed through millions of German hands, carrying this castle as the picture of Deutsche Ritterlichkeit, German chivalry itself. One more myth is worth clearing up while we're here. You will sometimes hear that Eltz inspired Walt Disney's Cinderella Castle. There is no documented connection at all, a good story attaching itself to a building that by now should probably be used to it. What is documented is this. The Kempenich line, the last of the 3 medieval branches still standing, owns Eltz today. Johann Jakob Graf zu Eltz has managed the estate since 2018. The 34th generation of this family recorded on this rock since 1157. In April 2024, Germany's most senior Monument Conservation Prize was awarded to the family for exactly the kind of stewardship this story has been about. Not for owning a castle, for refusing, generation after generation, to fake one. So, untouched? No. Bombarded for 5 years, forced to surrender, burned once by its own chimney. But never destroyed in war, never razed, never, in 850 years, taken from the family that built it. Eltz didn't survive by avoiding history, it survived by winning the argument every single time history came for it. If you want the full record behind this episode, every date, every source, the complete written guide, it's linked at the top of the description on our website. If you go yourself, there's no road to the gate. The best approach is on foot from Moselle station, about 90 minutes upstream along the Elzbach, and the towers only come into view on the final bend. Save your camera for that moment. The interior is guided tour only, so build your visit around the tour schedule and don't skip the treasury in the cellar afterward. And if castles with stories like this one are your kind of history, subscribe. The StoneKeep Atlas archive already holds 100 of them, from the Rhine to the Loire, with more episodes on the way.